Okay, so most of you know that my entire life, essentially, or professional life, has revolved around teaching. I taught psychology at CUNY for 7 years. I taught poker, teaching nonverbal behavior. I teach a lot. And one of the most effective ways for teaching or for communicating information is storytelling. I'd walk into students that have seen like 8 or 9 years ago, and then they'd be like, "Oh, professor, how are you?" And I'm like, "Good." And always say, "Do you remember anything from my class?" And like 8 years later, they'd be like, or 9 years later, they'd be like, "No, but I remember some of the stories you told me. So I remember the concepts that were related to stories." So there's a couple of stories that I tend to use in my poker classes that those of you who've taken any of my classes definitely know, and I want to kind of share them with the rest of you. So the first one is a story called "Members Only," and I don't know. Wow, it's like I've been telling this for a long time. This must have been now like 9 years ago or 8 years ago. I was at the Borgata in Atlantic City, and I was playing 510, and there was a player at the table, this older gentleman, with a members only jacket, and it said members only on it. And this was a clothing company back in the day, has since run out of business. And the reason why this person was so interesting is because he was the tightest player of all time. He basically folded all the time. And it was a Saturday night or a Friday night. It was one of those lively, like, animated poker tables where everybody's having a good time and it's enjoyable, and it's like a really good dynamic. And every single time it was members' turn to act, everybody at the table would start laughing, and they'd be like, "Members, you gonna do it? You gonna do it, members? You gonna do it? You gonna do it? You gonna do it?" And members would fold, and the whole table would go like, "Ah!" It's like one of those really good dynamics that you can prey on. Anyways, this guy's folding for like hours. It was funny. Finally, we get in one spot, and members raises, right? The whole table goes nuts, and they're like, "Oh my God, members raises, what's going on?" And you get call, call. I think it was like, I honestly don't remember the action perfectly, but it was basically like call, call, right? And I'm thinking, like, the guy never ever ever plays. Like, how could you possibly think that you're ahead? Like, why would you make that call? So on and so forth. Anyways, so everybody, two people call. I see a flop. The board's like ace. Ace three, ace blank blank, and it basically goes members bets out for like 3/4 of the pot or something like that. Player two go all in, and then members goes all in, and members got pocket aces, which would make sense considering he's never ever played and they likely to hit that board, and he flops a set, and I don't remember. I think somebody had two pair and somebody had a draw. And the reason why I tell this members only story is because this guy, all he did was fold hour after hour after hour, and in one hand, he tripled up, and he stacked like two people, and his hourly rate was like utterly insane. He didn't do anything. All he did was fold. And this story's got so many like interesting like morals or points to it. First, patience can pay off in games that are incredibly loose and not filled with thinking players who are putting you on a specific range of hand. The second thing, a specific range of hands. The second thing really is the fact that just because a player is communicating information, and just because people are actively adapting to that information via conversation, saying, "Oh my God, you're never calling. Oh my God, you're always folding," blah, blah, blah. It doesn't mean when the action comes or when it's time to make a decision that they're going to factor that information in their decision-making process. And it's one of the most phenomenal, it's just so, so interesting that a person could see that this player is never playing, but then still make a wrong decision. And I'd always tell, just recently I observed a game where, it's like 9 of us, and the 3 loosest players walked away with no money. The 3 tightest players walked away, they doubled up. I mean, it doesn't necessarily mean, it is still a winning strategy to some day. And I always tell that story, and I always want you to sometimes, as a story, I want you to think of members, right? Think of this guy who's just sitting there, who just fold, and the one time he makes a decision, he's got the nuts, and he triples his stack. And also, like, be careful. The people around you, just because they perceive the information doesn't mean they're going to factor in their decision-making process. And that's one of the more interesting things, right? They'll say something like, what do you got, buddy? Like, you got to have aces or kings. And then they call. And it's like, well, why would you actually do that? People are not rational. Poker is a game where it's based on thoughts. But in order to actually make a decision at the table, decisions are more governed by emotional control. And there's a great book called How We Decide by Jonah Lehrer, who unfortunately has been discredited in a lot of ways, but his book, How We Decide, was phenomenal, looking at decision-making processes and the emotional components under decision. I think it's really good for, not gonna help your game, but just good for information to think about. So, think about members. I'm going to be telling you more stories from now on, all to basically make a central point so that you could recognize or remember the story and apply the information from the story to your actual game, okay? That's about it. Make sure you head over to schoolcards.com/sign up. I have a lot of amazing things coming. I'm super excited. I'm not going to announce it for a while, but pretty cool stuff. That's about it.